Hare Krishna. Please accept my obeisance, Shai Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
We are continuing with chapter 15. Chapter 15, the Yoga of the Supreme Person. Chapter 15, first part of 15 is analogy of the banyan tree. And from verses 6 to 20, the last part of chapter 15 is Purushottam Yoga, that the yoga of the Supreme Person. And at the end, we will hear about the Trisloka Gita, that is a summary of the essence of the Gita also in some sense. So we will first speak now about verses 1 to 7, is a allegory of an Ashvata, a banyan tree. Lord Krishna describes an entire material world with its varieties of fields of activities situated on the higher and lower branches of that tree. So that we will discuss today, and then after that, because we will hear about the Purushottam Yoga. So at the end of this section, Krishna will conclude by saying that we are living entities, the Jiva, Mamavam Shach Beloke Jiva Buddha Sanatma. Living entities are my eternal, fragmental, separated parts. They are struggling for existence, being entangled in the branches of that tree. So now we will start with verses 1 to 7 that will describe this tree. And the message is we must get out of this tree, because this tree is a reflection. We must go to the real tree in the spiritual world by surrendering to Krishna. Go to the spiritual world. So now we will begin with verse 1. We'll go to let's go about sample. I don't see, yeah, I will have to start. Just a moment. Contents. So I'm starting the database so that you can see the verses also. Text 1, that should be there now. Share. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha. Urtvamulam Madasakam Ashvatam Prauh Afyayam Shadam Sejasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavit. The Supreme Personality of God said, it is said that there is an impersonal banyan tree that has its roots upwards and it branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is a knower of the Vedas. So I will discuss few parts of this extended purport. So Srila Prabhupada starts with saying, the purpose of the Vedas is to understand Krishna. That will be stressed further in this chapter. In 15:15, where Krishna says, Sarvasya Samridishana Vishtamata Shmitranama Pamsam Vedasa Sarva Rami Eva Vedya Vedanta Krit Eva Vedacham. Vedasa sarveram amiva Vedya. I'm to be known by the Vedas, Krishna says. So the purpose of the Vedic studies to understand Krishna. So if the purpose is to understand in Krishna, in a practical sense, it means Krishna consciousness means engaging in devotional service. When we're engaged in this devotional service, has already understood the purpose, is bringing it in practice. So the tree of this material world, there's no end for one who is attached to this tree. There is no possibility of liberation. So the problem is we are in this tree of the material world, and we are becoming attached to the twigs, to the leaves, to the branches. We will see that further. Then, if you are attached, you cannot get out. So one must get out of this tree of illusion. It's illusion because it's all temporary, and we take it as permanent, all its sense gratification. That's illusion. And we must cut this root of this tree with knowledge and attachment and get out of it. That's the message. Now, the basic principle of devotional service is detachment from material attachment to material activities. How do we become detached from material activities? By attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord. Then that will follow. That's the secret. And in this tree produces fruits, and these fruits are representing the results of living entities. Activities, namely religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. I think here, we go back here. Let's go a little further here. Here the details of the trees are mentioned. So we will discuss that, especially maybe in the next verse. The fruit represents the results of living entities, namely religion, economic development, and sense gratification. That the fruits. And we can see that then Srila Prabhupada brings up the point. Such a tree with its roots upwards and its branches down. We don't see that in this world. But still, he says, we can have an experience. We can see the trees on the bank reflect upon the water with their branches down and roots up. You can see it in the reflection in the water. So the tree of this material world is a reflection of the real tree in the spiritual world. So what's in the spiritual, what exists in the spiritual world must exist here in the material world. Otherwise it cannot exist. The same variety must be there. So and how does this tree grows? See here, reflection on desire. This reflection of the spiritual world is based on desire. This whole material creation has started by the desire of the living entities. And Krishna has made it as such that material nature starts to react. He injects the living entities, the souls who desire to enjoy matter in material nature. And by that material nature start to move and fulfill these desires. Also, this body is a machine meant for fulfilling material desires. Desire is the cause of things being situated in this material reflected light. One who wants to get out of material existence must know this tree thoroughly through analytical study. Then he can cut off his relationship with it. So you must know this tree through analytical study. And that's what these verses do. But that is, analytical study is here on the screen now. What it all means. And it will be explained in the next two verses. And if we understand that, how this works, we can cut our relationship. So it's always the same. In the third chapter, we got the knowledge between etc., jnanam, jnanam, prakati, and purush. Krishna says, if you know these six and the relationship, you can get out of this entanglement. And in the 14th chapter, the same thing. If you know these more modes and you know all these words, all these works, then, and you know the way out, undivided devotional service, you can get out of it. And now the same thing here with the banyan tree. If you know how you are entangled in it, that by your desire, you know how to get out. So that is Jnana, these last 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. Of course, the 18th chapter is a summary, but the other 5 chapters is all Jnana. And how by this knowledge we can get out of our entanglement. That's transcendental knowledge. The material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world, so there must be the same variegatedness in the spiritual world. A reflection is temporary, for it is sometimes seen, sometimes not. But the origin of whence the reflection is reflected is eternal. But the material reflection of the real tree, we have to cut it off. When it is said that a person knows the Vedas, it is assumed that he knows how to cut off attachment from the material world. So the purpose of the Vedas is to disclose Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to cut down this reflected tree and go to the real tree in the spiritual world. So now here, so this is a summary of this first verse. The entanglement of the material world is compared to a reflection of a banyan tree. The living entity wanders from one branch to another, trying to enjoy the fruits of this tree, and can find no end to it. Desire is the cause of things being situated in this reflection. The material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world, so the spiritual world must have the same variegatedness, but in reality, the purpose of the Vedas is to cut down this reflected tree and attain the real tree in the spiritual world. So that's a summary. That verse 2, which I'm going to read now. But before we read, first, we go to the book of quotes. There are 3 quotes, and we will read the first 2. Who wants to read the first? The banyan tree takes its roots. Mm-hmm. Shall I read?
Mataji, someone can read, please. I actually have to drive a little bit.
Okay. Then, okay, I will read, no problem. The banyan tree takes its roots and is created. So the seed of the creation is the spiritual world. Sa akshata, sa archata. The creation is coming from the spiritual world. Spiritual world means the kingdom of God, Narayana, Krishna. This cosmic manifestation has expanded downwards, and the root is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As the Lord confirms in Bhagavad Gita 10.8, Hamsavasya Prabhava, I'm the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Krishna is the root of everything. And the second quote, so here the material world is described as Urdhva Mulam, just like if someone holds you by the legs and your legs are up and your head is down, how long will you feel comfortable? This is the whole material world is like that, Urdhva Mulam. The Mulam should have been down, but it's up. Therefore, it is uncomfortable. So, these are interesting quotes of Srila Prabhupada. Let's go to the next verse, verse 2. Adasatvam pashristastasya saka guna pravitta visaya pravala adasamula nanusham tatani kamano bandini manusya loke. The branches of this tree extend downwards and upward, nourished by the three modes of material nature. The twigs are the object of the senses. These roots has also roots going down. And these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. So if we are going back here, going back to our tree, then the tree is nourished by the three modes of material nature. Nourishment here, three modes. So there is the desire, that's the cause of the living entities. It's nourished by the three modes. Yeah. The twigs of the tree are considered to be the sense objects. Twigs, sense objects. The tips of the branches are the senses. Tips of branch, senses. The ears, nose, and eyes, which are attached to enjoyment of different sense objects. The subsidiary roots are attachment and aversions. Attachments and aversions here, roots, secondary roots, which are byproducts of different varieties of suffering and sense enjoyment. The tendencies toward piety and impiety are considered to develop from these secondary roots. So after one enjoys results of virtuous activity in the upper planetary systems, he comes down to this earth and renews his karma. So one goes up and down in this tree. This planet of human beings is considered the field of activities, somewhere in the middle of this tree, the human planets, out of passion. So the more up to the root, the more goodness, and down, the more passion and ignorance. Now text, this is text 2. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Cambo. Screen. Back to text 2. Depending on which branch a living entity is located, he will possess a certain material body and specific type of senses, and according to the combination of modes that influence that part of the tree, he will be attached to particular twigs or sense objects. Now text 3:4, which we will read now. 3:4. Narupamasya tato palapyate nanto nashade nasa sampatishta ashvatamena saviruda mulam asanga sastrena tritena chitva tata padam tat parimarhitavyam yasmin katana nivartam tibuya taneva satyam purusham papatye chata praviti pashita purani. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Therefore, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. So one needs to find the cause of the tree. So Prabhupada writes, finally, in this way, when one reaches the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this is the end of research work. One has to search out the origin of this tree, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, through association of persons who are in knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then by understanding, one becomes wholly detached from this false reflection of reality. And by knowledge, one can cut off the connection and actually become situated in the real tree. Therefore, one must learn detachment by discussion of spiritual science based on authoritative scriptures, and one must hear from persons who are actually knowledge. As a result of such discussion in the association of devotees, one comes to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then, the first thing one must do is surrender unto Him. Surrender. And this is the result of performing devotional service by hearing and chanting. Therefore, to get out of entanglement of this strong banyan tree, one must surrender to Krishna. As soon as one surrenders, one becomes detached automatically from the material extension. So this is the point here, that we go back, so this is the solution is given here. One should hear from the spiritual master, from the Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and find the root. And the root is Krishna. Then the one surrenders to Krishna. Then one becomes detached from this material reflection. Now text 5. If one becomes detached from this reflection, one becomes a liberated person. And in this verse 5, it speaks about the symptoms of such a liberated person. So now we go read text 5. Yes. Nirmama moha chitta sangha dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kama tvandver vimukta sukha dukkha samyam kachanti amuda padam avyayam tat. Those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understands the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who unbewildered know how to surrender to the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. So, when one is free from the delusion caused by pride, it can begin the process of surrender. For one who is always expecting some honor in the material world, it's not possible to surrender to the Supreme Person. What are we asking honor for? Everything we have is given to us by Krishna and belongs to Krishna. Also our capabilities. That is nothing to be proud of. Proud of our intelligence. We even don't understand who we are. We are completely in illusion. That you can have great material knowledge and be proud of it, but what's the use if you don't understand? You cannot understand that you are not his body. That means you are in ignorance. Nothing to be proud of. We are constantly cheated by the material nature. And still, we have the tendency to become proud. This pride is an obstacle. Then we cannot surrender. We must give that up. We must become humble. So the whole world that moves under this impression that their land is earth, it belongs to human society, and they have divided the land under the false impression that they are proprietors. So one has to get out of this body conception, this false notion of human society as the proprietor of the world. No, all these humans, they are very temporary here. Nothing is there. It was not theirs when they came here. It will not be theirs when they go. So when can give up that pride and this false possessiveness? Because Krishna, he spoke about that already in the 3rd chapter. You may remember what surrender means. He explains in 3:30. 3:30 says, Maisa Vanikarmani Sanyasyatsya Matshetasha Nirasir Nirmamo Bhutva Yutyasva Vigatashpara. Surrendering all your works on me, with knowledge of me, no desire of profit, no desire of proprietorship, no profit, no thinking I get the profit of being honored and being proud. No. So Krishna explains that already, how to surrender. So one must give up this false notion of proprietorship and this pride. And then one can develop the stage of spiritual knowledge. One has to cultivate knowledge of what is actually his own and what actually is not own. What is our own? Our consciousness. That's what we have. The most important. And when one has an understanding of things as they are, he becomes free from all the early conceptions of such happiness and distress. Pleasure and pain. He becomes fully knowledge. Then it's possible for him to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So then one can come to that level of liberation. So here we have different quotes. Yes, interesting, Srila Prabhupada, he did not give much lecture on the 14th chapter, only on the 2 last verses. Mamsya Vyabhicharina and Brahmari Pratishthinam, 26 and 27, because this explains how to get out of it. And he gave lectures also on this 5th verse. Here, so there are a number of quotes of the 5th verse. Yeah, we will read not a long one. I will read a small one. Kapila Muni advised his mother devotee that if she wants to be free from material attachment, he should increase her attachment for the sadhus or devotees who are completely free from all material attachment. Yes. Prasangamatropa, yeah, it's a very important verse, 3:25, that it says, yes, attachment to this material world is the cause of one's entitlement, and attachment to the sadhus. If this same attachment is transferred to the devotees, to the sadhus, it brings one the path of liberation. Spashangamachrapasham Atmanakavadorvidu Saiva Satsukruta Mokshatvarmapat. Important verse from Kapila Dev's teachings says the same thing. So we should become attached to the spiritual master. And from his example and his teachings, we will learn how to give up our pride and become humble and surrender to the Supreme Lord. That, yes, here it's summary of the 5th verse. The surrendering process begins with freedom from illusion of pride that one is a lord of the world. This frees one from false association and can then cultivate spiritual knowledge. Upon gaining an understanding of things as they are, one becomes free from the dualities and can surrender to the Supreme Lord. So this is again the banyan tree. And now verse 6. We'll read verse 6. Atabasaite Suryonas Kankana Pavaka Katkatvana Nifartate Tatama Paramanama. That supreme abode of mind is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. That Krishna speaks about his supreme abode. Now, how to attain it when after surrender. So the spiritual world is described here. That the shining effulgence of all those planets called Vaikunthas constitute a shining sky known as the Brahma Jyoti. Actually, the effulgence is emanating from the planet of Krishna, Goloka Vrindavan. In the planet Goloka, and the planet Krishna, Goloka Vrindavan, that's the highest planet. But part of the shining effulgence that comes from that planet is covered by the Mahatattva, the material world. So where the whole material creation is a dark cloud in the spiritual world called Mahatattva. It's a cloud in the spiritual world. So good news, we are in the spiritual world. Bad news, we are in the cloud in the prison section. That's the problem. That in his conditional life, the living entity considers himself to be the lord of this material world, but in his liberated state, he enters into the spiritual kingdom and becomes an associate servant of the Lord. There he enjoys eternal bliss, eternal life, full of knowledge. But if he takes Krishna consciousness, there is a chance of healthy becoming detached from this world. One has to associate himself with devotees who are in Krishna consciousness. Again, Pasangacham Pasham. Yeah, don't create attachment to this world, but Saiva Sadsukrita. Transfer your attachment to the devotees, associate with them. And that will help us to become attached to the devotional service of the Lord, which is automatically the attachment from the world, from this material world. 5th chapter we heard. Therefore, one should take it very seriously that devotional service is described in the 12th chapter is the only way to get out of this representation of the real tree, only by devotional service, which is purely transcendental. That is number 6, first we will see one quote of the quotes on 6. Srila Prabhupada spoke, gave a few lectures on this. 6, it is not imagination. Just like if somebody gives you information about America, that America is very rich, there are many big bridges and roads and motor cars. So naturally, you become inclined, why not see America? So similarly, here is the information about the spiritual world to awaken your desire to go there. So why don't you try to go back to Rome, back to Godhead? Why is this foolishness? Why should you pay the electric bill? Go and live there. There is no need of sun or moon. Nataba sayate. The spiritual world is not lit by the sun or the moon, because everyone is effulgent. Every planet is effulgent. There is no need of these things. There is no ignorance. There is no scarcity. There is no miserable condition. This is called Vaikunta. Vaikunta means Vigata Kunta Yasma iti Vaikunta. That 6. There was a lecture in Nairobi, 1975, from 3/28/21. Now, back to our slides for the summary of this verse. In the spiritual world, which is illuminated by the Brahma Jyoti, everyone is liberated and enjoys eternal blissful life, full of knowledge. By association of devotees, one can extricate oneself from this false reflection of reality and transfer himself to the eternal realm. Now we have verse 7. Verse 7 is a very important verse. In verse 7, Krishna defines who we are as a spirit soul. That this is our identity. That Krishna explains, and we will first read the verse, the last verse of today. Amaipachachi Velaka Jiva Bhuta Sanatna Mana Sastri Indrayani Praktistani Karsati. Living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental part. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. So, just this is a long purport because it's one of the most essential verses of the Bhagavad Gita. Living entity is described here as a fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. And Srila Prabhupada uses many times the word Sanatan. Krishna is Sanatan, spiritual world is Sanatan, living entities are Sanatan. So the Lord expands him in 2 kinds of expanses. The first are the Svamsa of the Vishnu Tattva, and the secondary are the Vibhinamsa, the living entities. So the Vishnu Tattva or Svamsa are his personal expansion, and the living entities, the Vibhinamsa, are his separated expansions. So his personal expansions are expansions like Lord Ram, Nrsimhadev, and they are the predominating deities of the spiritual planets who are self-effulgent. The separate expansions are the living entities, that are we. The separate expansions have also their individuality. We are individuals. But we are fragmental portions of Krishna, and we have fragmental qualities of Krishna. And one of these qualities is independence. We are independent in the sense that we can desire what we want. So we have a minute form of independence. If we misuse that independence, we become conditioned, and by proper use, we are liberated. We are in the spiritual world. So it seems that all of us here misused it, otherwise we would not be here. In his liberated state, he is freed from his material condition, and is under the engagement of transcendental service of the Lord. In the conditioned state, he is dominated by the material modes of nature, and forget the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As a result, he has to struggle to maintain the existence of the material world. So we have heard in this previous verse a description of Vaikuntha and of Goloka Vrindavan. We find the descriptions also of Goloka Vrindavan in the Brahma Samhita, and the description of Vaikuntha you find in the third canto, chapter 15 in the middle. Very beautiful description of Vaikuntha. But when a living entity gives up this material embodiment and enters into the spiritual world, he revives his spiritual body. And in his spiritual body, he can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face, and he can understand the Supreme Lord. But in this verse, explains that we are conditioned souls covered by material body, mind, and senses. But by Krishna consciousness, these coverings can be removed, and we can manifest again our spiritual body. So at liberation, the living entity gets a spiritual body by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At the end, the fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord is qualitatively one with the Supreme Lord, just as parts and parcels of gold are also gold. That we will read one quote only, and then read the summary to end. So there are two quotes. I read the last one from Srimad Bhagavatam 3.9.42. That's about the Mayavadis, but the first one is from the same purport. I'm the super soul of every individual. I'm the Supreme Director and the dearest. People are wrongly attached to the gross and subtle bodies, but they should be attached to me only. The Supreme Lord, the Personality of Godhead, is the dearest in both the conditioned and liberated states. When a person does not know that the Lord is the only dearest object, then he is in the conditioned state of life. And when one knows perfectly well that the Lord is the only dearest object, is considered to be liberated. These are degrees of knowing one's relationship with the Lord, depending on the degree of realization as to why the Supreme Lord is the dearest object of every living being. The real reason is stated in Bhagavad Gita 15.7. Mamaivan Soshiveloke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. The living entities are eternally part and parcels of the Supreme Lord. The living entity is called Atma, and the Lord is called Paramatma. The living entity is called Brahman, and the Lord is called Parabrahman or Parameshvara. That Ishvara Paramakrishna, the conditioned souls, who do not have self-realization, accept the material body as the dearmost. The idea of the dearmost is then spread all over the body, both concentrated and extended. The attachment for one's body and its extensions, like children and relatives, is actually developed on the basis of the real living entity. As soon as the real living entity is out of the body, even the body of the most dear son is no longer attractive. Therefore, the living spark or eternal part of the Supreme is the real basis of affection and not the body, because living entities are also part and parcels of the living entity. That Supreme living entity is the factual basis of affection for all. One who has forgotten the basic principles of his love for everything has only flickering love because easy Maya. The more one is affected by the principle of Maya, the more he is detached from the basic principles of love. One cannot factually love anything unless he is fully developed in the loving service of the Lord. So, this is a deep purport. Good to read it a few times. But it means, we have to understand what spiritual love is. And love for the body. What's the difference? Now we will read the summary to end of this very important verse. The living entities are eternal fragmental parts of Krishna and possess fragmental portions of his qualities, including minute independence. Due to misuse of the independence, the living entities become not really captivated, they become captivated by Maya. And rather than achieving pleasure, they are forced to struggle and suffer while endeavoring for material pleasure. Because the soul's personal individuality is eternal, it cannot at any time merge with the Supreme Lord. One's spiritual body is the same quality with the Supreme Lord, and real liberation means to revive one's spiritual body upon entering the spiritual world. So we have went to this section. We try to understand the analogy of the banyan tree. Good to read this a few times to understand all these aspects. And we heard about the need to search for the cause for our entanglement. And then with knowledge and detachment, cut the root of this tree. That especially text 7 has put very clearly explained who we are, eternal separate parts of Krishna, and does a strong argument against Mayavadis of impersonalists. Because Krishna says that we are eternally separated parts, separated eternally. That so we cannot merge, eternally separated. That then, of course, we need to realize this. All these points. We spoke about realization, verse 5. About how to give up our pride, our sense of possessiveness, and then only you can start to understand the transcendental subjects, because then you can only surrender. That so next week, we will finish chapter 15. Then we will discuss more deeply the Purushottam Yoga and the Trisloka Gita at the end. And then we will enter already text also a part of chapter 16, the divine and the demoniac. Next week, I will be in Canada if Krishna willing. And next week, Sunday, we will have from Montreal. And also we will then have a Monday evening session also. Any questions, comments, please?
No, Maharaj. Excellent. Are you planning to visit US after?
I will come in July, from 8th July till the 21st of July. I will be in D-Land teaching Bhakti Sastri. And if Krishna willing, I will come to New York in January.
Okay.
Still some few months, January, I'm planning in the winter. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Jai Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Bol.
Jai Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.